Hi there, my name is Clive Lewis. I'm the Labour MP for Norwich South, and I wanted to, first of all, thank everyone who's turned up today, whether that's physically, virtually, or you're just coming to look at this internet page a little bit later on, or whether it's through social media and you come across these videos. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to the speakers and the contributions today. I wanted to say thank you for the solidarity you're all showing with the victims of racism, not just in the United States, not just George Floyd and all the other victims of racism that we see on our TV sets, on our internet screens, and our social media every week when it comes out of the US, but with the victims of racism all over the world, whether that's in Australia, whether that's Europe, here, the States, wherever that racism is taking place. You're showing solidarity with them, and I thank you for that as both the MP for this fantastic city and also as a Black man myself. I'd also like to thank the organizers for all that they've done in putting this on together, that mainly young people who have really taken on board all of the concerns about social distancing, safety with COVID-19. It's an irony, isn't it, that this happened at a time when the very people disproportionately being affected by COVID-19, because in part of racism, because of social and economic deprivation, because of poorer health outcomes, all of that, which we'll come to in a moment, then something insidious like this happens. And it makes us have to question whether we can turn up and support this cause or not because of those health concerns. COVID-19 isn't a racist disease, but it does highlight perfectly the disease of racism. And we'll talk about that in a minute, perhaps. But thank you to all the organizers of this who've taken into account those safety concerns, who've put on the ability for people to see things live streamed or recorded. It's a testament to your hard work and your fantastic attitude to this, that this has taken place. So thank you very much for that. George Floyd was lynched. I'm not going to beat about the bush. There's no point. He was lynched. If you've ever seen a real lynching before in terms of the photos, the violence of them, this wasn't about slinging a rope over a tree and hanging someone quickly. These were long drawn out, protracted, brutal affairs. And I'm afraid what happened to George Floyd was so many similarities. It took him 9 minutes to be killed. It took onlookers to scream at the police as this was happening. He had an audience around him of willing participants who were keeping people away, backing him up. This was a lynching. The violence, the police officer looking into the camera, just like, I can do this. I'm allowed to do this. He just spoke so much about the situation in the United States for Black people. You would have heard so many people there speaking with such eloquence about how racism has impacted them. And I can't speak for what it's like to be a Black man in America. I can only speak what it's like to be the MP for this city and a Black man at the same time. I've experienced racism as I've grown up from a small child through now to everyday life. It happens, even though I'm an MP. You would have heard other MPs, other Black MPs talk about this. But what's happening in America is something which many people think, well, this is an American problem over here. It's not so bad in the UK. It's different in the UK, because let's not forget that structural racism comes from any modern society where it has accumulated vast wealth, which makes it the wealthy country that it is today, whether that's the United Kingdom, whether it's France, whether it's Spain, Portugal, America. They extracted vast wealth on the back of slavery and colonialism. And these issues plague us to this very day, because the racist ideology that was required to justify such brutal practices and the colonization, which was brutal in itself, of vast swathes of the world and peoples, required a supremacist approach to how we as people interacted with one another. And that was where the racial hierarchies came from. And from it a justification for violence to those who were seen as lower than you. We saw what the outcome was was in the 1930s and 40s in Nazi Germany, when you dehumanize people, call them cockroaches, treat them less than animals. We've seen it before. Human beings are capable of doing this, and they create ideologies around it to allow it to happen. And one of the first things you have to do when you are a perpetrator of this ideology is to convince people that it no longer exists. Because most people, most human beings, are decent human beings. It's our humanity. We have to have belief and faith in that. They're decent human beings. They don't like the thought of racism. But we're also creatures that live within societies. Our social conditioning has taken place. We live in a racist, sexist, at times homophobic society. That means that impacts on us as people. But most people, as I say, want to do good. So one of the things that racists, dedicated racists who believe that they are supreme, have to do is convince you that these issues are just isolated issues, that these are a few bad apples, that this isn't systemic. It is systemic. Racism is systemic. And the police force, there are 18,000 of them in America. Many of those individual police forces, if not all of them, are, it's quite clear to me, part of an institutionalized, systematic racist society, and therefore, as an institution, they are racist as well. And you know, they have the chokeholds, they have the militarized policing, the weapons, the attitude. You've seen it all the time now, and people filming them. Yeah, and this is what people are now dealing with on a daily basis in the US. But acts of violence like that happened against George Floyd and countless other Black men and women in the United States. It's not just physical violence that takes place. It's also political violence. The political violence, which is like an echo of racism, an echo of slavery, of colonialism that permeates through our society and our economy. You know, if you are Black, you are more likely to see unconscious bias against you. You're more likely to have a poorer education, more likely to be excluded from school. You're more likely to see fewer job opportunities. You're more likely to have mental health problems and get worse treatment when you go there. More likely to have worse health outcomes. We look at COVID-19, we can see that. Less likely to have job promotion prospects. More likely to be unemployed. The list goes on and on. This is political violence of its own kind. Look at the deprivation that takes place in the United States. Look at the social deprivation we're seeing reflected here in the UK. Health and social and economic deprivation of disproportionately Black and ethnic minority people. But it's also affecting those communities as well across the country, whether they're Black or they're white, who have poor health, economic health, and education outcomes. And in many ways, racism is a multiplier of economic inequality. And that's why I'm a socialist, because I understand my fight against the excesses of capitalism for a democratic socialist society are always going to be blocked by the very people, the elites, who want to see working people divided. And they use racism as one of the tools to do that. But that means that my experience, my class struggle is going to be different from white colleagues for all Black people, because racism is an added sting in the tail. We're at the bottom of the class. That's where we are. And that's why our experience of racism is that much different, that much worse, because there's a different component to it. But we still got the same struggle to fight for a better society, a better economy. That's why if we're going to see a solution to racism, it isn't going to come from a handful of policy changes and tweaks and a task force or better training for police officers. It's going to come from fundamental reform to who has money, who has wealth, who has power, and who does not. And it's going to have to be a redistribution of that wealth and power. That's what I'm in politics for. That's why I'm down there. That's why I understand what's happening in terms of racism in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, wherever it is inextricably linked to economic inequality and a fight of those who have wealth and power and those who don't. And we have to understand that racism is a disease that benefits no one except the 1%. and those who support them. So my message to you is thank you for coming here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking a knee. And thank you for your solidarity in the fight against racism. Thank you, man. Thank you.